Hello again. I'm Angela Taylor, your host for Unlocking the Club. And today, before my conversation with who I think is going to be a remarkable guest, Sandy Knight, as I like to call her, I want to unlock this concept of balance. It's been coming up quite a bit. I know on a few of our previous episodes, various guests have talked about that concept of balance or how they navigate wellness in their lives. Cheryl Burrell, a few episodes, talked about prioritization and how when she left 3M, that she hadn't done all the things. She did the most important thing. And that helped her avoid that sense of overwhelm that I think many of us feel when we don't know what to say yes to and what to say no to. We also had Shawntera who referenced a podcast or an interview that she had listened to with Stacey Abrams. And Stacey, who we know is juggling so many things as she is running for governor of Georgia. I think Stacey Abrams said something to the effect of that she doesn't have work-life balance. She has work-life Jenga, and that everything is put in its proper place. And if we were to take one thing out, right, everything would come crashing down. And that resonated with me for so many different reasons. I think that my life is so compartmentalized and I enjoy everything that I do. And I think if there was one thing that I took out of the rotation, everything else would come crumbling down. Last week, Cherie Buckner-Webb talked to us about how she actually doesn't like the term balance or work-life balance. She actually wants to think about being in wellness and so many different reframes for the concept of balance. And so after we spoke with Cherie Buckner-Webb, I thought a lot about that. And I actually have to admit that for the majority of my corporate career, I thought I was failing at the concept of this work-life balance. Then several years ago, I was actually on a flight from Boise to Minneapolis, and I was sitting next to a senior leader at Energizer. And as we got into conversation, she told me that she spent the majority of her week in St. Louis at their headquarters. And she would fly back and forth to Boise for long weekends. Sometimes, she would be in St. Louis for a couple of weeks at a time if she had important meetings. So we had this amazing conversation that tends to happen more on planes than I would like to believe. But that conversation spanned numerous topics, including what was it like to live in Idaho as a woman of color, our families, work, school, travel, again, a litany of other things that we talked about. But I appreciated her transparency. So eventually I actually worked up the courage to ask her, because the thing that I'd been thinking in my mind was, what is it like to spend most of your time in St. Louis when you have a husband and children here in Idaho that you may be able to FaceTime every now and then on a daily basis, but you don't have that connection? And so I worked up the courage and started to ask her how she actually was able to navigate that work-life balance under her current circumstances. And she said something that changed the way that I look at the concept of balance. To paraphrase her, she said something like, balance is unique to each of us, and that she actually doesn't subscribe to the traditional concept of balance. Instead, she firmly believes that balance is actually yours to define. And then she went on to illustrate the amazing balance, if you will, that she actually does have in her life and the choices that she's made with her family and with her family in mind. Sounds really simple, right? Well, in that moment, I actually realized that the concept of work-life balance was another one of those social constructs, a social construct that I have subscribed to for the majority of my career, and a social construct that in fact has a completely different definition depending on gender identity. It was a social construct that in many cases, but not all certainly, but those of us who identify as women are expected to prioritize family, whether that is your spouse or partner and your children, or your parents or siblings. And in many cases, those who identify as male are celebrated for literally immersing themselves in work and traveling quite often or being at the office for long hours, all of those different things. And so for those of us who identify as women, it had long seemed as though we must prioritize family, being a caretaker, having kids, etc. In fact, during our episode, Unlocking Your Authentic Self with Beverly Oden, Bev actually talked about how cathartic it was for her to finally admit that she never actually wanted kids. And you get the sense that it took quite a bit of courage for her to not only share that on our show, but also to admit it to herself and to be okay with it. Those of us who truly love the work that we were doing, how do we define balance? How do you define balance in your life or wellness? Well, there's not a single answer to this. So I encourage each of you to constantly check in with yourself and ask, what does balance, or honestly, what does wellness look like for me right now in this moment? It is sure to evolve over time as circumstances change. For me, I was actually in conversation about a similar topic with someone who has been a mentor for me since college this past weekend. And as I was sitting on my patio, reading a book and checking out some articles that I hadn't been able to read over the last week or so, I talked about how I was finding so much joy in actually being in the garden. I had just spent a couple hours pulling weeds in my garden and harvesting some of the vegetables, the tomatoes and strawberries and peppers that were growing in my garden, along with some collard greens. And she actually had to pause for a moment and just say how happy she was for me that I had found this balance, if you will, or this sense of wellness and the space that I could be my full self and not feel like I had to fit into anybody else's box or anybody else's definition. And I realized that, you know what, I had beautifully navigated a successful corporate career and now was able to find the balance that was perfect for me, not what people expected me to have in my life. And we'll talk a little bit about this with today's guest, who from a distance looks like she is having and beautifully navigating a successful corporate career as a lawyer and also navigating her love for quilting, for sports, for travel, and for more. So my question for you all who are listening to this episode is, how can you own your truth about what work-life balance or wellness consists of for you? How do you make sure that you say yes to the things that challenge you, that motivate you or teach you and grow you? And how do you say no to those things that don't currently have the capacity to you to do, or for someone else who can actually benefit from you saying no and offering it to somebody else? So I invite you all to actually hit us up on Twitter at Unlock the Club, Instagram at Unlocking the Club Podcast, or Facebook, Unlocking the Club Podcast, and let us know how you are actually unlocking wellness or unlocking the balance in your life. For me, I recall a conversation Oprah had on one of her Super Soul Sunday shows where her guest, and I believe it was Deepak Chopra, where they deconstructed what many of us grew up thinking was joy. And I think many of us equated joy with happiness, cotton candy and balloons and good things or birthday parties. And what he shared was the Greek definition of joy, which is a feeling of inner gladness, delight, or rejoicing. And that is something that we can get when things are going well and when things are challenging, when our cup is full with work, or when we are able to find a space where we can relax and be mindful and in wellness. So here's to unlocking joy in your life. I have a lot to rejoice about, and I have even more to be delighted for right now in this moment, because our special guest on Unlocking the Club today is Cassandra Knight.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. Grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
On today's episode of Unlocking the Club, I'll be in conversation with Cassandra Knight. Cassandra joined PayPal in November 2017 as its VP Chief Litigation Counsel with more than 20 years of complex litigation experience, including over 10 years in the financial services industry. She came to PayPal from Morgan Stanley, where she worked in the San Francisco, New York, and London offices. She has handled a wide variety of litigation matters, including federal securities class action suits, international arbitrations, and regulatory enforcement matters. Prior to Morgan Stanley, Cassandra practiced law at the firm Keeker and Van Ness in the city attorney's office in San Francisco. Cassandra earned her BA from Stanford University and her JD from Stanford Law School. And on a personal note, she is an avid sports fan, favoring the San Francisco Giants, the 49ers, and the Stanford Cardinal football and basketball teams. She also enjoys quilting, which is a family tradition that dates back several generations and is inspired by her family members who are talented quilters from Mississippi. In 2017, in fact, Cassandra's work was featured in the Fiber Matrix, an exhibit at the Westbeth Gallery in New York City. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club with our guest, Cassandra Sandy Knight. Sandy, it is a pleasure to see you today. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Angela?
Doing well. So I know I'm catching you on the back end of some global travel. It sounds like you had a busy period of time.
Indeed. I am just back home from a trip to first Portugal, my first time there, and then London. So really enjoyed going to both of those places and was very lucky to miss the heat wave in each place. And I really loved it.
Oh, and I heard about that. London, 104-degree temperatures, not a lot of air conditioning. Unbelievable what we're experiencing around the globe right now.
That's right. I missed it by 2 days. So very lucky to have missed that.
Nice. Well, we are so grateful to be able to have you on Unlocking the Club. You are someone that, again, I have the honor and pleasure of having in my life, whether it is those tailgate parties and Gary's Burgers at the Stanford football games, or someone that I look up to who has so successfully navigated their corporate career. And Sandy, I get curious, we just read your bio, but I would love to know what is in between the lines. Like, right, there's so much context and contour to your journey that can't be captured in a bio. So who is Sandy Knight and who have you had to be along the way in your journey?
Well, first, let me say, Angela, that the feeling is mutual. You are one of very few people I can call a true friend, that I know I could call in any time of need and whom I truly admire. So thank you for those kind words. And it is really my pleasure to be here today. And, when you cut through all of that other stuff, I think the important things at the end of the day that really matter, I think about it. And today would have been the 100th birthday of a fellow Stanford woman, a woman named Elizabeth Gonda, who I had the pleasure of meeting through Stanford sports. She was a very early Stanford woman, sports pioneer, and I met her sitting next to her at Stanford basketball games. And so loved getting to know the beloved Mrs. Betty Gonda, and was thinking about her earlier today. And, at the end of the day, it's you think about just what really matters in life, right? And it's not your degrees and your job and all of those things. It's the relationships you build and the people in your life and all of those things, and those times that I spent with her over brunch and talking about life and those types of things. So I think when you read between the lines and think about what really matters to me, it's those things. It's thinking back about, my family relationships. And you mentioned the quilting, for example, and you can see a little bit in my background probably. On my wall is my quilting design wall. And the reason I love quilting is because it ties me back to my ancestors. And I think back to my aunts and my grandmothers and my great grandmothers. I can remember when I was a small girl and would go back to Mississippi, where both of my parents grew up in rural Mississippi, and I would see my grandmothers and great grandmothers sitting around together quilting. And that was one of the family traditions that was dying out. My mother's this amazing Southern cook. Still does that, but very few people are quilting now. And so I decided to take it up, and it's a way to allow myself to be creative and to let my mind go, like what you were talking about with the gardening. So I love doing that. And, that's a way to spend my free time. So, those are the things that matter. My relationships with, my mother and my niece and the rest of my family, and with you all, with Gary and other close friends. And, now I just celebrated my first wedding anniversary. So, so very excited about that. So the fact that I'm now a wife and stepmother is a remarkable thing that I would have never believed you could call me a few years ago. And so it's one of the things I think we'll probably talk about today, is that I think if you start to dig beneath the surface a little bit, that I think being open to new opportunities and possibilities in your life, which is surprising even to me, that I was probably a little closed off before and thinking about some of those things for myself. And I'm so happy that I've become more open to those possibilities and opportunities because my life is happier and better now than I could have ever imagined before.
Well, that's fantastic. So many things that I actually want to get to, but I want to start with this last piece about being open to things and opportunities. A couple questions. So what was the catalyst to you now being open to those opportunities? And what was it about being closed off? Like, did you notice and recognize that you were actually maybe avoiding opportunities? And why was it that you were choosing to say no to those opportunities previously?
Yes, I think part of it is just, sort of was my human nature, right? I used to joke that I was the ultimate, like, who moved my cheese kind of girl, right? So, and that's just, sometimes that's who you are, right? Like often, in order to become a high achiever, you're that type A kind of personality, right? And I prided myself on that kind of routine. Like I could get up every day and do the exact same workout and eat the same food and do whatever it was. And part of that was how I succeeded, right? That's how I did well in school. That's how I could do well on the job and all of those sorts of things. But sometimes that can get you really stuck in a rut. And that makes it difficult when something bad happens to know how to navigate your way around those obstacles, right? And so it was, I think, of a couple of things in life that helped me figure out how to sort of get out of my own way. One of them was definitely about 10 years ago when I had the opportunity to make a big change, and that was to move to New York within the Morgan Stanley job, right? And even though it was clearly the right move career-wise, I just didn't want to do it because, I lived in California my entire life up until then. I hate cold weather, my friends and family were all here. And like I said, I just didn't want to do it. All my season tickets were here, everything else. It sounded all good work-wise and all bad personal life-wise, right? But, I am a person of faith. I prayed about it. I talked to my family about it. And I decided to go ahead and take that risk and move out on faith and do it. And then in retrospect, it turned out to be one of the best moves I ever made. Because when I was thinking about it in a really sort of two-sided way. Like I said, I thought it was very much just, it was black and white, I thought beforehand. But it actually turned out to be a very good thing for me, both personally and professionally, because it opened my mind in so many ways and it forced me to try to learn new things. That's when I sort of ironically learned how to quilt, was going to that huge metropolis of New York, because then I had more space in my life to try new things, and I met new people and I traveled more and I did all of these things by leaving and going to do that. And somewhat ironically, I ended up getting my dream job at PayPal because I left and went 3,000 miles away to New York and then took the stretch assignment in London for a year and did all of those things going far away, is what then brought me all the way back to California to the PayPal campus, which was 3 miles from where I was born, and got that job. But I only got that because I'd gone out and gotten all of those other experiences, gotten the international experience, the, broader work experience by doing those things for that 5.5 years. And so it was really something that I was so happy I was able to get out of my comfort zone and out of my own way and do. And that's just one example. And the bigger one, personal life wise, again, was I never thought, it was interesting what you said about Bev, because I also, didn't think I wanted children, but then became just more open to the ideas of what life and marriage and family meant for me. And it's not for everyone. I don't think you need to be driven by those ideas, but just became sort of more open in a lot of ways to what a family life could mean for me. and ended up, once I moved back to California about a year later, meeting the love of my life and getting married last year. And like I said, it's been, just sort of a complete opening up of what life could mean for me in terms of the fulfillment of my life journey moving forward.
That is the amazing depiction of what getting outside of your comfort zone will do for you.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned how, making that decision. And I remember it was a difficult decision because you were leaving everything that you had known your entire life behind to take this opportunity. But I recognized from a distance how it unlocked this openness from you. Like the quilting, right? The travel, like you were going to the Australian Open, you're going to the US Open, these things that you were experiencing, you already had a rich life, but it felt like you were now like hitting your stride as far as the possibilities and what you wanted to make your own as a result of that. And I wonder, was it the job? What was it that was unlocked in you to create that openness?
I think what it did was it just forced me to try new things. It really did. It's sort of because I think you can be, when you're such a creature of habit, like I was, that you can just be that hamster on the wheel, right? Every day. And you kind of never jolt out of it unless you have to. And so suddenly when, I was out of that routine, then I had to come up with something new and take a fresh look at myself and my life and what I wanted to make of it. And so then I was able to do that and think, okay, what am I going to make of myself and my life? And what am I going to do with it? And I think some people, when you really see what you're made of that grit, and those Mississippi roots and what my people were able to do when faced with their challenges. And it's like, okay, am I going to sit around and feel sorry for myself that, I don't have friends here and I don't have something to do? Or am I going to get up and, come up with something and figure out a group of people to go do things with, and not sit here by myself and feel sorry for myself. And that's what I did. I literally, it was hilarious, got on Google and looked up, learning how to quilt, and found a store called the City Quilter. And I'll never forget this phone call. It was hilarious because unfortunately, the City Quilter no longer exists. It went the way of a lot of small businesses in the last few years, but it was a wonderful place. And I called up the store and asked to sign up for beginning quilting classes. And the woman started speaking to me for a few minutes. And after she asked me a few questions, she says to me, "Dear, it sounds like you don't know how to sew." And I said to her, "Oh, no, I don't know how to sew." And then she just started laughing at me. And she was like, "Girl, you got to learn how to walk before you can."
She's like, baby steps, honey, baby steps.
Baby steps. I was like, just tell me what I need to do. So she signed me up for the beginning sewing class. I took the beginning sewing class, and then I took the beginning quilting class, and then, made my first quilt, and it was great. And, but that was a way for me to meet people and to fill some time and to start doing something that, I'd been thinking about and talking about for a long time, but hadn't done anything about. And so I think you do. You start, taking those baby steps and doing things. And that was just one example, like you said. And so it was the job, which also was a new challenge for me. But I also created all of these other spaces and challenges for myself as well.
Right. Well, and taking baby steps, one step at a time, I think actually is the perfect analogy for how you navigate a successful corporate career. I think so often people see someone who's successful and they think that you can get that way overnight. What were some of the baby steps that you had to take along the way to get to the point where you are sitting at these tables and making significant decisions for some global entities?
I mean, that is just such an important lesson in so many ways, because it's scary when I think about it out loud. I'm 28 years into this career now, and I am still learning every day. And I think you have to that's such an important lesson, that you have to keep learning every day. You can't get stagnant or think that's it, or that's when you fail, right? You have to think of it as a constant journey that you're on, and surround yourself with people who will help you keep learning. And when I made the shift in particular to PayPal, my learning accelerated at a pace that I will never forget and will always be thankful for. And it was in large part because of a mentor and sponsor and sister girl for real who has become such an important part of my life that it's been such a blessing to me. It's a woman named Wanji Walcott, who hired me at PayPal. She was the general counsel of PayPal at the time, and she's now moved on and become chief legal officer of Discover. And it was so interesting. Your opening comments resonated with me in so many ways about people who've learned to prioritize in their lives and sort of the gender roles of what that prioritization has meant. And it was interesting to me because I thought about two of my prior leaders and their takes on those issues. So one was a gentleman named Eric Grossman at Morgan Stanley. I was at Morgan Stanley for 11 years. And his take on work-life balance, I'll never forget, was that he doesn't believe in work-life balance because he thinks it's all life, right? So it was a little bit different than your typical male, and he's definitely one of those hard-charging work guys. He thinks, you spend, it all goes together so much that you just have to think you can't compartmentalize it. And you have to think of like what you want your life to be like and how you're going to build that and the people in it. So that was his overall take, and I can, expound upon that some. And then with Wanji, she was so interesting in so many ways because at one of the early offsites, this is one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley, this amazing lawyer, and I depend on her in so many ways still to this day, even though we only worked together for a little bit less than 2 years. She taught me how to be a real executive. Like, she's an incredible lawyer, but the mindset shift that she helped me with is to not just be a lawyer, but to be a true executive and partner to the business and really go to the next level in that way. And I can never thank her enough for that. But one of the things I'll never forget is that on one of her early offsites, when somebody asked what she was most proud of that she had done in the prior year, one of her biggest accomplishments, her response was deepening her relationship with her husband.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, nobody else had anything like that, but that was what she offered and, talked about that. And so that was really profound to me. And I mean, don't get it twisted. I mean, this is a badass, really executive woman who's taught me how to be a badass executive, right? But definitely has her priorities straight in life. And so, I really appreciate it. Like I said, I can turn to her anytime I need to.
That's awesome. It's great to have those advocates and allies, right, as you're navigating your career. And I definitely want to address both of them. One of the things that I appreciate what you said about Wanji and prioritize and sharing it, right, at a retreat, that she wanted to focus on like her relationships. I think so often, I know for me as a Black woman in the workplace, I took pride in compartmentalization, right? Folks wouldn't know, maybe they would know about the football games that I was going to on the weekends or tailgates, but like who I was at work, like was what they had access to, and who I was Friday at 5 through Monday at 9, right? That was none of their business. Right. And I don't know if that served me well in compartmentalizing that to be an executive. Right, that guidance that Wanji had. What's your sense of that compartmentalization that we find ourselves in?
I think that you are spot on with that. And that particularly as Black women and Black folk in general, that we feel like we have to keep that mask on, right? And that, we just have to keep ourselves almost at a distance and it's fine. But I just think in terms of truly deepening and building those human relationships, you can only get so far if you have that wall. And it's difficult. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg, right? Because I'll tell you, until I got that relationship with Wanji, and I still get emotional thinking about it. Like, I joke with people sometimes that like, until I worked with her, I was like, is this what it was like for white folks to come to work all the time before? Right?
Right. Someone who sees you that you can connect with, that understands you.
Yes. It was like feeling sunshine for the first time, right? To have someone who like really saw me like that and cared so deeply about me and my career and who I was, to make sure of what I was doing and that I was progressing, that I knew the true inside baseball of what was happening, like who had the juice in certain areas, what was happening, all of those things. And, to give the feedback, you hear so much about feedback, right? And how important it is to your career to get real feedback. She gave me the toughest feedback I ever had in my career, right? Right. But because I knew she was giving it with love, like that was great. Like she got me the exposure that nobody else would have given me. She put me in front of the board of directors, for example, but she wanted to make sure that I was as tight as possible. And so she would make me run those presentations over and over again with her. And so before I went the first time, we were getting it. I was in my conference room and running it with her at like 6:30 in the evening. And so, she gave me some notes about my slides. It was like, this is good. This needs to be tighter, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, okay, so let's do it again at 6:00. And so I was like, okay. And so then I realized, I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, like the board presentation is at 9:00 in the morning. I'm like, she means 6 a.m.
She's like, we getting up early because you got to be on point.
Right. But I'm like, you know what? If the general counsel of PayPal is willing to meet me back here at 6 a.m., I'm going to redo my stuff and have it together and be back here at 6 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Because she's willing to put that time in and do it with me. And you know what? Nobody else would have.
No one else would have. Another reason why representation matters.
Right.
And it matters not just because, right, it's the psychological safety that's created is obvious, right? And I think sometimes people presume we're going to take it easy on each other. But I know for myself is I receive that feedback, that critical and constructive feedback so much differently from someone who understands the burden that I carry.
Right.
Right. And it feels like that's what Wanji was able to do for you. Is she wasn't going to take it easy on you.
No.
But you could receive and digest that feedback a little bit differently.
Absolutely. And it doesn't always happen, We had Black partners in law firms and all kinds of stuff who either, didn't care, couldn't be bothered, whatever it was. But in that relationship, that's exactly what it was.
We all need a Wanji in our lives. But I want to kind of get to where you were saying that she taught you how to do what you were doing, but with an executive lens, to have that executive mindset. What do you think she meant by that? Or what were you able to augment in your life as a result of that perspective?
So an example was that, I'm a litigator by training, right? Meaning that my nature is to fight. Yeah. And
fight and win. Because we know winners have winners think about winning.
Absolutely. You know about winning. And so that was always my mindset going into things. And what she made me stop and think about was, what does winning really mean for the company and my clients, right? Because my mindset was what it meant in my part of the universe. Because I always wanted to win my cases and what it meant for me, and sort of notching scores on the scoreboard, right? Right. And she, made me step back and think, even if I beat my opponent to a pulp, right, that might not be a good thing if it blows up that relationship long term. If it means that we don't win in this part of the marketplace. If it means all sorts of things for, this person moving forward with, their group, whatever it is, you've got to be able to step back and think about what winning really means overall and sort of understand the business at a deeper level for all of those components and constituents. And it really, like I said, it was a total mindset shift. that was incredibly illuminating and has helped me tremendously going forward.
Yeah, such an important question. What does winning mean, not just to myself and my current domain, but to the organization? And that's the difference. When you're unlocking a club, to go from where you are, whether you're an individual contributor, if you're a people leader, wherever you are in the organization, to get into that C-suite or that executive level, like you have to be able to derive results for the business. So what value are you bringing to the business? And that is, to Cheryl Burrell's point in a previous episode, she was able to prioritize those things that weren't just going to check the boxes on a day-to-day basis, but she was checking boxes off that were bringing value to 3M, right? And so that is the distinction and the mindset. And it's really important. I think so often we miss that as we're on our journey because we try to do all the things. And if we try to do all the things, we don't do anything particularly well.
Yes.
Do the most important things. And the most important things are those that are driving value to your organization. And you have to have access. So you have to have relationships that Sandy's been talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. And that was another thing that Wanji preached so often that I think we, especially as women and as Black women, we can get distracted and pulled into doing too many other things. And Wanji was so good at reminding me of that, is that, it sounds simple, but you have to be laser focused and excellent at your day job. And they expect us to do 50 other things, right? Right? That might make somebody else look good. And we can do the things that are important to us, but you have to be a jealous guardian of your free time, right? And maybe pick one organization, one or two that you give your time to, right? And that's it. But you can't get pulled into every speaking engagement or every other organization that might want a little piece of you, or, doing every committee at work. And, because they expect us, like there will be so few of us in those senior roles, especially. We only had, there's 30,000 full-time employees, for example, at PayPal. And unfortunately, just a handful of Black executives at my level or more senior. They want you on every diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging committee and meeting and speaking engagement and all of those things. And you just don't have time for all of it. So you have to choose very carefully the things that you do and be very careful with that, because at the end of the day, it has to be your day job that takes the priority.
Yeah, I love that. Be a jealous guardian of your time, right? And create that container and set those boundaries. I actually want to probe a little bit and find out how you do that, because, and I'm not sure if this is the same experience that you have, but I found early on in my career, I was saying yes to all of those things for a few different reasons. One was because I didn't want people to think that if I said no, that I wasn't capable of doing it. Right. So it's a sense of proving that I am capable of doing it. I don't know how I'm going to find the time, but I'm going to squeeze it in and figure it out. And also I didn't want to miss out an opportunity, because I think sometimes, as a Black woman, you get so few opportunities, right, that you don't want to pass up. But how did you navigate and be that jealous guardian of your time?
The FOMO is real, isn't it? Right. It really is. And, and it's interesting that it was this late in my career, because I was exactly the same way. Signing up for all those committees and getting pulled into all that stuff and thinking, like you said, that I didn't want to, think that someone thought I couldn't do it, or I was afraid to say no to people and all of those things. And it was really that Wanji empowered me to say no and to look at really what is the most important. And I realized once I did it, that it was okay. The only things that were going to fall apart were the things that were important to my job, what I couldn't afford to let fall apart. I've heard people use all kinds of hokey analogies, but it's really true. You got to figure out which of the balls can bounce and which ones are glass, right? And only keep the glass ones going. And you just have, and that's true in your life too. And the older we get, it comes down to things like our parents and all those things, and you just start figuring out what truly is important. And all the other stuff, it just doesn't matter.
It just doesn't matter.
It just doesn't. Yeah. Our time on this earth is limited.
It's not promised.
It is. Tomorrow is not promised. So we got to take care of our families and ourselves and get the job done and not worry about all the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, Sandy, one of the things that I couldn't help but notice when you first is the reverence that you have for Wanji. It's just so heartwarming, right? Like I can feel it's a palpable energy, right? When we talk about Wanji and how she showed up for you. And it reminded me of, years ago when I was at the WNBA League office and we started this platform called Inspiring Women. We had a Inspiring Women luncheon, and the keynote speaker for that luncheon was Madeleine Albright. Rest in peace. Mm-hmm. An audience member asked her a question about some of the women who have helped her out on her journey. And she had shown herself to have this like amazing wit during the whole luncheon in her keynote. And she had to pause and she's like, I got to be honest with you. I've probably had more women that have stood in my way, right? And have had more men that have helped me along the way. And she encouraged me. She's like, we're here at an Inspiring Women luncheon. We have to support one another.
Yes.
We have to. And it sounds like Wanji is modeling that. You were modeling that, like, right? You may not even know like how you were helping me in my journey for the decades that we were tailgating, like just seeing you thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the corporate space was motivation and inspiration. But I noticed when you talked about Wanji, you got a little bit emotional.
I do.
And I want to, what's underneath that?
I started to say earlier, I get a little bit emotional because I think it was lacking for so long, a little bit about what Madeleine Albright was saying, because there had been so many years without it. Like, one of my colleagues, I have a lot of other women. Wanji is just the standout one, of course, because she was the one who hired me and still gives me so much of herself, no matter how busy she is. But I've had other women like Danielle Sutton, who's another senior executive at PayPal, who also gave me so much of herself and continues to do so. Other women at Morgan Stanley I still rely upon, Alita Wingfield, Libra Clemens, others that I think about. I get emotional, I think, because, like I said, like Madeleine Albright said, there were so many times where I felt like I was out on a deserted island, where we feel like we're there by ourselves. And there was a woman, Cindy Ferran, I worked with at Morgan Stanley, who texted the other day saying that she got some feedback about an intern at her job that just felt so slanted and frankly racist about one of the young men at her place. And I was like, you know what? Almost 30 years into this gig and we're still getting this stuff. Right. And I'm just tired of it. It's really, it's hard that, we still feel so othered, that we don't have the support that we should in the workplace. And so to finally have gotten out of that and to have, gotten really that love and support that, like I said, I think is, really sort of standard for so many others, and that the workplaces just don't get. They don't understand that that's what true sponsorship is. I mean, it changed the trajectory of my career, right? Fundamentally, in so many ways, to get that opportunity from her, my compensation, my, just everything from that one person. Like, that's in a way wonderful, but in another way, ridiculous, right? Right? And so why should there be almost like a chance in Canada? I'm not smarter or more capable or any of those other things than I was, before or since I met Wanji. So why is it just that I got that one job opportunity with her, changed my career path so dramatically?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Amen. And it's exhausting.
It is exhausting. It is exhausting.
Like just thinking about how first for you to, from undergrad lens, like, right, you had to be better than anybody else to get to Stanford. You had to be better than everybody else in the classroom because they were wondering why you were there.
Yes.
Then to go on to law school and then to work in the San Francisco City Counselor's Office,
Yep.
Right, your law firm, all those different things. It's an uphill battle at every turn. And I think that's, I'm biased and I've had this lived experience that Black women are the most misunderstood people out there, like, right? Because on one hand, we can't let them see us sweat,
right? We
And on
can't
the other
ever
hand,
appear angry.
we can't appear angry, like all of these things, like, right? And you have to prove yourself constantly that you are worthy to be at the table. And I'm wondering for you, Sandy, who, again, outside looking in, you're at those tables. You're at the top of the ecosystem at PayPal, at Morgan Stanley, like, right? You're in the president's box at the US Open, all these things. And yet I feel that it hasn't been easy.
Yeah, because it hasn't been. I mean, even, when I was at the president's box at the US Open with Katrina Adams, the president, I could tell she had the exact same battle. It's true for each of us in each of those seats. And so where, you're the one or one of just a handful. And so we've just got to start changing it. And sometimes people ask, and I'm like, you just start changing the numbers. Just do it more. Like, right? You can't keep having us so isolated in these few places and expect it to be any different. That's just too much. It's too much of a burden to bear.
Yeah.
It really is.
And I think so often the burden has been on the individual.
Yes.
Right? We get another degree, we perfect another thing versus looking at the system and saying the system is not supporting the excellence that is already there within the system until you have a Wanji, right, or Danielle or somebody that is able to see you fully. And I want to ask, like, one of our Juju Hook, who was a strategic marketing consultant for me on this podcast, when I interviewed her before launching the podcast for kind of behind the scenes, one of the things that she said to me as part of the process of coming up with this concept for unlocking the club was that in listening to me and my conversations about my journey, what she recognized was, from the outside looking in, again, Stanford grad, NYU grad, worked in the WNBA, run some WNBA teams, like, you've lived, treasured life, and you still don't feel like you are in the club.
Right.
You're club adjacent.
Right.
So outside looking in, just reading your resume and your bio, like, you've checked out all the boxes. You are experiencing all the things that we think we want. And do you feel like, are you in the club? What club do you want to belong to? And who are the gatekeepers for that club?
Right. I mean, it still doesn't feel like it's our club, though, right? Like, we're still kind of banging on the door, like, well, oh, please, will you let me be part of it? Can I come in and hang out for a little while? Right. And I mean, it's so many of the battles that we keep, I keep thinking about, like, I was afraid to even let my hair be natural. And the fact that I had Wanji, who was a Black woman running things who had natural hair, was so free, even that kind of a thing is so difficult for us at these levels because there are so few of us, right? Even the way that I dress, the fact that I have a job that is, like I said, is sort of a hard-edged job where I am literally fighting in some way. So I have to take the edge off and try to look particularly feminine in some way so that they're not intimidated by that type of a job. Just all of those things where we have to think about it just a little bit more all the time to be accepted in that club. Whereas, the guys, I mean, the CEO of my company shows up in faded jeans and a faded black shirt. And the only question is whether he's wearing flip-flops or cowboy boots that day, right? So, and no matter how much we want to act like we're in the club, like, we just can't go out like that. Like, that's just, that's never going to fly for us. And so, yeah, I think we have a long way to go to really be part of that club.
Yeah, right. Like, the system's not going to shift anytime soon, and most likely in our corporate professional lifetime. And so how do we navigate that? Because I think it is the sense that you are, like, beating against the door, like, literally on a daily basis, trying to prove that you are worthy to be in those situations. And you mentioned it earlier, like, of feeling that sense of being othered all the time. Like, what is it that we can do to actually not have to worry about that, to not carry that burden? Is there anything that we should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, that's the core question. And I feel like it's putting the burden on us. And I don't know that we can change it. Yeah. Right. And I think you hear the companies saying they want to do something about it, but they don't do anything about it. Right. And until you see, until they are the change that they supposedly want to become, I mean, as I mentioned, the assessment of the intern earlier, right? Well, I saw a study about that where they stripped away the identifying characteristics of a writing example for legal interns. That was more than 20 years ago, right? And the same thing is happening now where, if it was a typically Black, sounding name, it got these harsh reviews, like, can't believe he went to that law school and, will never succeed. Whereas if it was supposedly a white person, has lots of potential, is going to do great here. And here we are 20 some odd years later, and it's the exact same stuff. So can we change that?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that what I'm learning through these conversations on Unlocking the Club is we actually just need to create our own club. Like, so what Wanji did for you was create your own club, like, right, in that domain. Like, we won't even know, like, the doors that have to be open to get into that club.
Right.
We can continue to be good at what we do and navigate it, but also perhaps be okay with being in the club where you feel like you can exhale.
Right. I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. And, I did say, it's interesting you say that, because when Wanji left, it was almost exactly 3 years ago. I, said out loud to the entire team at PayPal that I'm going to, each day try to think, like, what would Wanji do? And try to, because she was so open and worked so hard as a manager to try to pull others up and all. And I was going to try to live like that as a manager, right? And I hope I lived up to it.
Yeah, we can all only hope to have someone like a Wanji, like a Sandy, to look up to and to model for others what to do in those moments, in those situations. Now, I was thinking about, I was in a conversation earlier today with my team at the Dignitas agency. We were talking about, I don't know how the topic came up, but Stacey mentioned an excerpt from a book, The Wake Up by Michelle Mijong Kim, who talks about the Black napkin. And I was like, wait a minute, you're going to pause there and tell me more about the Black napkin. And I guess in the book, The Wake Up, Michelle Mijong talks about, she was at Deloitte and went to an event, a dinner with a senior partner at Deloitte. And the senior partner, a woman, had Black pants and they all had a white napkin. And so she asked the servers, can I get a Black napkin? And we all know the reasons why it makes so much sense, like, right? Because your Black pants would be messed up for the rest of the evening and you couldn't not notice it. And Michelle in that moment was like, wait a minute. Like, I didn't even know you could do that you could ask for a Black napkin. So what are some of those things that you, as you've navigated your career, that you have learned that you can ask for?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great analogy. I love it.
Those unwritten rules of, like, ask for a Black napkin.
Yeah, exactly. Just go for it. I love it. I think one is the most important one that we as women are so loath to ask for is your value and compensation. Right? Because we are just like, they make you an offer, but like, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Right? Yeah, I think you need to. I talk very openly, especially with my fellow women, about what we are making and what is, a comparable compensation for X job and what you should expect at that level. And so what you need to go out and ask for and be able to demand. So I think that is a Black napkin type of thing that you need to know about and we should not be so shy about.
Yeah, that is a priceless Black napkin right there.
Right? Exactly, because that is part of life. It's not everything in life, but it's a very important part of life. We are out there, helping to take care of our families, setting ourselves up for the future, for good retirement, all of those things. And it's a very important part of our future. So I think that's one thing. Another thing that I've gotten involved with in the last couple of years is board service. I volunteer for some things. So for instance, I was on the Stanford National Black Alumni Association board as a volunteer, but I am now also on a corporate board of a small private company. And I'm very interested in expanding to a public company board. And I've recently joined Stanford Women on Boards and am interested in making that part of my future service as well. So again, something I think that it's important to start talking about and make that part of your networking and community and start asking for. And so that as well. And then just, back to the time theme, cutting out time and asking for things. And I think this was this is part of the people part. If you need help from your friends, just talking through things. I mean, I see if the pandemic taught us anything, boy, if you didn't learn how to self-reflect out of that time, you need some help, right?
Yeah, nothing but time.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so, we had so many mental health issues, even like, my stepkids talk openly about it. It was a little bit of a jokey speech, but my stepdaughter even talked about like some of the struggles she had and how she's able to be, get closer to us and come with us. And I think, as we all start to reflect on those things, have gotten closer to the people in our lives, to just spend the time with the people you really care about and talk about the things that really matter to you, whether it's your aging parents and the needs that they have. That's a big issue in my life and something I need help with, and just to talk to friends about, and don't think you have to keep all that in to yourself. Things like that and the issues with the kids and whatever you have going on. I think those are the kinds of things, that's a big black napkin. And also in the same way that you open up and share about those things with the friends, I think also putting up those barriers you need to, like, one thing that, it actually hurt my heart a little bit earlier today. I had a lunch planned with a friend. And again, I'm a jealous guardian of that time. So this is a person, is supposed to be just a friend. And then, so we set up the time, and then that person tried to backdoor like, oh, well, this person would like an audience with you. And here's his bio. He's a partner at a firm and blah, blah, blah. And, I was so like hurt and angry about it. I almost started to cry about it. But instead, I'm just going to like politely say, you know what, we got to cancel. Right? Because I think you've got to just like set up, you just got to protect your space and your time. Right. And I'll explain it later. I won't just be, but you just got to like really, I think, be careful with your time and your people.
Yes. That is another priceless big black napkin right there, because I think it's innate in us to want to be giving. We're caretakers for everybody, right? And really giving of our time. But if we don't take care of ourselves and carve out time for us to be in our own self-care, right, then we can't be any good for anybody else. So I appreciate all of those amazing nuggets. And I think, when you think about negotiation, such an important piece in the corporate space. I think one of the reasons why in a dominant culture's social structure, they don't want us to talk about how much money we're making is because of the gap. And on last week's episode with Cheryl Buckner-Webb, we talked about the gender wage gap and the equal pay day for Black women is the end of September. So it's going to take 9 months for us to make the same amount of money that a non-Hispanic white man made at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. We need to start talking about these things, and then not just being so happy to have an offer, but to demand our value in return.
That's right. And actually that brings up a good point too, is that we can't even just talk about it amongst ourselves, because while Wanji has been so incredible in my life, one of my other mentors at PayPal was an older white man, right? You got to have some of those people around too, who are good folk and will keep it real with you, so that you have some other data points as well. Exactly. Yes. So you know what's going on out there, because it's not right.
Yeah, right. Social capital is so important. And so to actually have, even if you can't make it in the club, to have an ally who is in the club is so important. And so find those things, build those relationships with people that don't just look like you have a similar lived experience, but those that actually have tremendous influence inside of the ecosystems that you're navigating.
That's right.
Well, Sandy, I know that you have some new news that we can't quite reveal on this show, but I think it's really important information, because I think sometimes when you're not looking, but you're open, amazing things can happen.
That's right. That's right. And that's been true. We've talked about that in sort of other ways in terms of, the shift I made when I was at Morgan Stanley. And then that was true with the PayPal opportunity. I wasn't looking then and was able to get back to California because that opportunity presented itself, just through relationships and people I knew. And then the same is true again now, where I wasn't actually looking to make a shift. And so it has not been officially announced yet, but I actually, after almost 5 years at PayPal, will be making a career move and leaving PayPal, and we'll be moving on to yet another very new and exciting opportunity. So can't announce it quite yet, but we'll be hopefully joining you for an Ask Me Anything soon to talk about that new opportunity. Very excited about it.
Awesome. We definitely are going to have Sandy back on for an Ask Me Anything to talk about that journey and navigating. I think one of the things that you shared with me, Sandy, was that, again, being open, how opportunities presented themselves to you. And so what is it that you were able to do that some of our listeners should consider when, again, they have their head down, they're working extremely hard, they're driving results and bringing value to the organization?
Yeah. And so I think really it's mostly a mindset and a relationship thing. People talk about networking all the time, and it's not just having your profile on LinkedIn or, it can't be sort of any of those artificial things. It's got to be more of like, am I really open to what is right for me and to the people in my life who will think, if this is really a good fit, is that the right person that I'm going to call for that right fit when it presents itself, And I think that it sounds simple, but if you actually keep those people in your life, because like I said, I wasn't even looking, right? But if you keep that open mind and those folks in your life and keep those relationships genuine, I'm not out there trying to shove in an audience with somebody. Instead, I keep my true friends. And I'm actually pretty good about separating business and friendship, frankly. But just, always am open for like, what, if I think that person is the right one for this, then I keep my eyes and ears open. And I think other people do the same for me.
That's great. What are some of your guiding principles? Because you've had like PayPal, Morgan Stanley, like you've had these top of the bucket list jobs. So what are some of the principles that you have to know?
For me, again, this might sound a bit simplistic, but for me, it's always the people. You want to make it the right opportunity as well. It's got to fit the skill set and all. But for me, the turning point is always about the people. And one of these for me as well is, it had to fit my lifestyle right now with, my fairly new marriage and home and all of those things as well. So thankfully, it's worked out well with my husband and being able to stay close to home. And I'm fortunate enough to live within walking distance of my mother, who also acts as my private chef and makes me dinner each weeknight. As I mentioned, she's an amazing Southern cook, but somehow I've also lost more than 20 pounds in the last couple of years eating her food. I don't know how that worked out, but
mom cooking is always right. Good for you in many ways.
Exactly. So all of that is all good. But, all joking aside, you spend so much of your time working every day that it has to be with people I think you trust and where you trust the mission of what they're doing. And when you think you can actually build, I think, that very strong relationship. And I don't know if I can ever replicate the Wanji relationship, but I'm going to try really hard to do so.
No, that's powerful. We're excited for you in those next steps and look forward to being in conversation about what that is, where you are landing, and what you're hopeful for sure. A couple more questions before we head to the back nine. You mentioned, your new marriage, right? So you're a year into your official marriage.
Yes.
And I'm curious, a colleague of ours wrote a book years ago, maybe around 2012, 2013, is Marriage for Black People.
Oh, for
right?
white people.
For white people, right?
Yes.
Marriage for white people, right? And it was based on a student in a elementary school in Washington, D.C., where a teacher was talking about marriage. And the student's like, wait, do Black people get married? Right?
Right.
And there was so much insight in that. And I get curious for you later on in your journey of you finding space and being open to a relationship. I think as I'm a single Black woman, right? My mom sent me the book, Single Black Woman, when I was 2 years out of college. There's actually a book called that, right? And she's like, in the inscription, she's like, don't get any ideas, just something that you may want to read. Right?
Gotta love mom.
Gotta love mom. And so, navigating the corporate space, having to be the best at what you are, probably don't have a lot of time for those relationships.
Yes.
And you found love.
Yes.
Unlock that for us.
I saw Rick Banks, the author of that book, a couple months ago. Good old Rick, who's been married 30 some odd years, right? So interesting that he authored that book. And it's funny because my now husband always asks me about you. Why isn't Angela married? She's so wonderful. He calls you regal. He thinks you're
I need to keep Andrew around. Like I need to get a ringtone.
Andrew's like your hype man.
We all need an Andrew and a Wanji in our lives.
Right, we do.
That means we need a Sandy in our lives.
We do, but it's funny because we can laugh about it a little bit, but I try to explain to him what it is to be us because I don't think he understands it because he has such a different background in life. And part of it was that not only did I not see myself getting married, but I think I didn't because of what it is to be us in so many ways, right? And part of my being open was that I ended up being open to someone who was so different than me on the surface, like Andrew, but ended up being so perfectly matched to me. And it's, so wonderful. And so, but, the ways that we're so different on the surface are hilarious because he's not American. He's from London. He is Jewish. I'm Christian. It's like, and being from my strong Southern Baptist family, I always thought it would have to be someone with whom I was perfectly equally yoked, right? And all of those things, I always thought, I always dated taller guys. He's my height, maybe even slightly shorter. He doesn't even understand American football. He's an English Premier League guy. I took him to his first basketball game ever. And at one point he asked me, why do they sometimes shoot one of those shots versus two of them? And I was like, sometimes they shoot three of them. Just a
mind, right?
And he was like, what? And he booed when the dancers came out. We were at a Warriors game. He was like, this is ridiculous. And the fact that we started playing music during the game. So like all of these things like on the surface, how could I end up married to this man? But he is so intelligent and so loving, and there is no one in the world I'd rather go to sleep with every night and wake up with every morning. And our life together is just the most fulfilling and wonderful thing. Like it's better than I could have ever imagined. And so if I could get in my time machine and go back 5 years ago, and like, I would have never imagined any of this, in terms of the work and the marriage and being a stepmother, any of it. And I just, I feel like God has played a little bit of a joke on me in some ways in showing me that it could be, this different and that I had no idea what life had in store for me in terms of the level of happiness. And part of it for me was that I think, frankly, I was happy and worried about giving up some of that happiness. I was worried that if I opened my life to someone else, because I saw some of our friends, frankly, end up in marriages or relationships and marriages that didn't work out so well, and that I could mess up my home and car and season tickets and everything else that I had built up and, successful career and all that I thought made my life so good. But realized that the fulfillment that I could find in my personal life by being open in this way was so much more than I could have ever expected. So you certainly don't want to do it foolishly with someone who's not worthy of that level of trust and sharing, but with the right person, I think it's spectacular.
Yeah. Well, and for those of you that are listening to this podcast, if you just were able to see the glow and the smile that Sandy had on her face as she was talking about the relationship and the journey, that is why it's the right thing and that you were open to this for the right reasons at the right time in your life. And maybe, right, if you met Andrew 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been ready for that.
That's right.
And I think it's one of those things, we're going to put this on rotation because so many of friends are like, Angela, you need to be open to it. And it's right. Like, do I have space in my busy life for something that's going to disrupt everything that I've grown accustomed to? And I think it's being able to be open to whatever is next that's going to fill you up. And that is going to, someone who meets you where you are is going to help you grow into the person that you want to be, not take away from who you are. I think that that's a really important part, what I see and have observed in the love that you have formed with Andrew.
That's right. That's right. And just, supports me completely where I am and as I am and who I am, right? And then has actually made me better. Before there were men who I dated who was almost in some ways try to undercut me a little bit. Have you ever had that?
Yes, competition, right?
Competition, exactly. Or maybe you need to lose a little weight or some of those kinds of things, whatever it was. And instead, this has just been completely different and loving and supportive.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were doing a lot of winning, as you and I joke about all the time, right? Losers worry about winners and winners worry about winning.
Right.
And we can also say that that's Cal versus Stanford, right? Cal worries about Stanford. Stanford, we worry about winning. Sandy, you are truly winning at life, and we are winning because we've had that great fortune of having you unlocking the club. Thank you so much for the wisdom and perspective and insights and candor that you've shared on today's show. I can go on in conversation with you, but I know that you have things to do, right? Some cool thing or something like that to do. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to go to the back nine, and coming out of the back nine, I'm going to ask Sandy some poignant questions, some not so quick hitters, and we'll find out a little bit more about who Sandy Knight is. We'll be right back on Unlocking the Club. Do you want to stop feeling like you have little to no control over your life's journey and instead amplify your life's purpose? You all know me as Angela Taylor, host of the Unlocking the Club podcast, but I am also a business, career, life, and leadership coach, helping my clients to live their best life. Every day, I help my clients discover what they truly want in life, and then unlock the club on how they can live their best life. If you're like many of my clients, you have found yourself over the years prioritizing everyone else and everything else. Your job, your significant other, your family, your friends, your community, the list goes on and on. Well, I'm here to tell you the best thing you can do for others is to invest in yourself. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to succumb to the fear of failure. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to feel like you're being selfish. You simply need to prioritize you. You may be thinking that coaching is for other people, but trust me when I say that we all could benefit from a good coaching relationship. Together, we'll build a plan to help you amplify your gifts, clarify your goals, and accelerate your journey toward the life you desire, which may be finding financial wealth, spiritual health, relationship success, and/or freedom and flexibility. You no longer have to feel like you aren't welcome into someone else's club. Let me empower you to leverage all of your extraordinary gifts and create your own club. Head on over to unlockingtheclub.com to book a free 20-minute introductory call to learn more about our Unlocking Your Journey coaching packages, or use code UNLOCK to get a 15% discount on the 6-month coaching package. Today is the day to invest in yourself. Let's unlock your journey. This is Angela Taylor, your host on Unlocking the Club, and I am here with Sandy Knight on the back nine. And Sandy, this is not one of the normal questions I ask our guests, but you've talked about how amazing of a Southern cook your mother is, and I can vouch for that. The pecan pies, right? Thanksgiving is a joy in the Taylor family, particularly when there's a Stanford game, because sometimes we get those special deliveries. Is there a favorite recipe that you have, or a recipe that you've been able to pick up from your mother?
Oh my God. So interesting you asked, because I am not half the cook my mother is. And so she doesn't have a lot of recipes because she's such a from scratch and feel cook that the only things that really have recipes are the cakes. So she has an amazing German chocolate cake, 7-Up cake. But most of the others, like the pecan pie you mentioned, the sweet potato pie, the collard greens, the black eyed peas, all the other stuff is by feel. She made me do the meats this year for Thanksgiving, so like the turkey, the ham, and all of that. So it was under her very close supervision. But most of the rest, you just got to learn under her great tutelage.
That's awesome. That is talent, right? And that is something that we don't talk enough about, like with our ancestors, how with collard greens or ham hocks or like all the things that no one else wanted that are now like delicacies.
Yes.
They were able to put some stuff together to feed families for generations.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So question for you, kind of beside your home or San Francisco or the Bay Area, what is the place where you feel the safest to be yourself?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably Stanford Stadium.
Tell me more.
Oh, like you mentioned a lot earlier, we love our tailgates, right? Where we can just cut loose and talk. I love talking about the games with you and Gary and the rest of the crew down there, that we could just, scream and let loose at the games, whether it's out of joy or frustration. And so I love it. It takes me back to my youth, and it's just so joyous.
I agree with you. There's something magical about the place. And it's so refreshing to be in that space with others who are high achievers, who are doing great things. And we put it aside on those, Saturday afternoons just to celebrate our team, whether we're Andrew Luck good or not so good.
Right.
Just be in each other's company.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. What is one situation that you have found yourself recently walking into that you walk into with trepidation every time?
Ooh, trepidation every time. That one is tough. Let's see. I would probably say, gosh, it's interesting because, one of my cheesy sayings is that I always tell the kids is that fear is false evidence absolutely realized. And so, right. And so I try not to have trepidation often, but I think I have it when, it's interesting because like I said, I really try to avoid it. It's funny. I think it's probably when I am trying to approach some things with mom, when we're trying to, like you talked about earlier, we're trying to go through this part of life and figure out, she's had some health issues lately and we're trying to figure it out, and it's tough, right? And, because that mother-daughter relationship is always a delicate one where now you've got to take a little bit more of the lead.
Yes.
But you want to be respectful and still be in the daughter role. And so you have some trepidation about that.
Oh, that's so good.
Right?
Yes.
And so that's it, because you want to be delicate and respectful, but you've also got to have some control. Yeah, I think that's one.
Well, first, thank you for actually taking the time to think of something, right? Because you could easily just throw something out there and be like, let me just get to the next question, Angela. I don't like this one.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate that because that is a really, really good one. How do you navigate that? Because it's a role reversal to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And, I went through this for 7 years when I came back, and where you do want to respect who they are and that this is your parent and they raised you, they brought you into this world, right?
Yeah.
But there's also a necessity for you to be able to take care of them or to give them guidance and advice as well. And it's probably less uncomfortable for us as the daughters than it is for the mothers who I know for Black mothers, their pride and joy is being able to be there to take care of their children.
Yes. And so for them to feel like they're losing that grip is very tough for them.
It's tough. And it's the energy that you have to expend trying to navigate that, right? To make sure that you can still honor them and their journey and who they are. No, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. That's a really good one. What's something, Sandy, that you now refuse to hide that you found yourself early on in your career not sharing or being transparent about?
Ooh, that's a good one. Gosh, that's a lot.
How much time do we have?
Exactly. How much time do you have? I think let's go with the hair. We talked about that earlier, right? God, I relaxed my hair from when I was 9 till I was 45, right?
Wow.
Right? Oh, thank goodness we're over that.
Did you not have any of the bad Jerry curl days?
I had no Jerry curl.
My goodness, you were lucky.
I was very lucky with that. But thank goodness. But I was free now.
That's another big one that we have to unlock. And I don't know if people recognize how big a burden like our hair truly is.
Such a burden, time, money, like things you can't do. And it's just so much healthier now. It just, right? You still have to do Black women's hair 101 for them, like half the time, right? Because like I showed up at work with it blown out the other, and they're just like, right?
Did you?
Right? Like, no, this is still my hair. No, it didn't grow like overnight.
I was on a call with our producer Luis earlier today, and I was joking when I think after my freshman year in college, I learned how to water ski. Reluctantly, like I was going to be happy in the boat with a life vest on and just watching everybody else, but I got encouraged and peer pressured into actually trying it out. And I'm like, because there was a bunch of white people in the boat with me that didn't understand that one of the reasons was because I can't swim,
right?
And because I don't want to get my hair wet because it's a process.
It's
I don't have any money and any money to go and get the hair done again. I just got it done.
Right. Exactly. Come on, man. You got to think ahead.
You got to think ahead. Well, last one for you, Sandy, is what is one piece of advice that you have received that has changed your life?
Ooh. That's a good one. I've shared some of them already because Wanji's given me so many. Oh, man. I'm trying to think of one that I maybe haven't shared yet that has changed my life. Gosh. I'm thinking if there's maybe one from Mrs. Gonda, since, like I said, it would have been her 100th birthday today.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, she's such a sweet woman. It wasn't so much a piece of advice, but just sort of a remembrance from her, where, you know, she wasn't allowed to go to the basketball breakfast early on because they didn't allow women to go. And so she would send her husband to go, who had no interest whatsoever in Stanford basketballs, but he would go and get the stat sheets for her and listen, you know, to everything they said and like take notes and bring it back to her. And then, you know, report dutifully so that she would know what was happening with the basketball team. And this was like, you know, through the 40s, 50s, I think even through the 60s. So like, you know, decades he would do this for her. And then I met her, I think it was finally in the 90s. And then I would get up at 4:30 in the morning, drive down from San Francisco, pick her up at the Webster House and take her to the basketball breakfast because she could finally go. And so, you know, like I said, I just wanted to remember her today and say to others, like, if there's something you can do at the end of the day, you know, when we're older, and just, you know, if it's have a breakfast with someone and listen to their old stories and spend a little time, do it. That's what matters, right?
And that is the perfect advice to have. Because I think so often in our busy lives and busy schedules, we don't make time for those moments. And I think the last couple of years, right, where we've had nothing but time to self-reflect, you know, one of the things that has prominently come to my attention is the importance of those moments that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this hour and 20 minutes has been a moment that I will treasure. Sandy, thank you so much for making time to be on Unlocking the Club. This has been an amazing conversation. You, again, are an inspiration to me, and I know to those who have the pleasure of listening to this conversation. I wish you well in your next endeavor and look forward to being in conversation with you for that Ask Me Anything to find out a little bit more about the new opportunity that presents itself. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Angela. It was an honor to be with you.
Awesome. Well, that was another episode of Unlocking the Club. It was truly an honor and a pleasure to be in conversation with Cassandra Sandy Knight. And I hope you all enjoyed the opportunity to learn and listen to someone who's had quite a remarkable journey and is living a life of joy to the fullest. If you get a chance, would love for you all, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you receive your podcasts, is just leave us a little message. Let us know what you're enjoying about our shows. Leave us a little review, because we will actually take that information to continue to try to make this show and our future conversations that you will benefit from. So find Unlocking the Club on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast, and let us know how we're doing and what you're enjoying about our conversations. For now, this is Angela Taylor, your host with Unlocking the Club. Until our next episode, be well.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.